What's up, Gator Nation? Welcome into the Gators Online Show. Zach Albaverdi here, and we are going to preview Florida Ole Miss, the regular season finale in the Swamp, senior day for the Gators, a 12 p.m. kick, but I think it's going to be quite the crowd for Lane Kiffin and his number 9 Ole Miss Rebels coming to town. We'll be joined on this episode by Jake Thompson, who covers the Rebels for the On3 Sports Network and OM Spirit, to learn a little bit more about this Ole Miss team, kind of what they've done this past week. They had off coming off that big win over Georgia, and what they're going to be bringing to the Swamp. So we'll also talk about our keys to the game and certainly what the Gators need to do on their side. But we'll bring Jake in now. Jake, appreciate you joining us, man. I know you're getting ready to head down to Gainesville. First time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Zach. You caught me mid-packing the suitcase. I've got one hand in the suitcase and one hand finishing up some work so I can hit the road. But thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. No, this is I think a matchup that probably both sides have been looking to since it got scheduled. It's been a while since Ole Miss came to the Swamp, and certainly it's been a while since Lane Kiffin came to the Swamp, and a lot of interesting storylines that kind of are playing out between these two teams. We'll get into all of it, but just to kind of start, give us just your season overview of how 2024 has gone for the Rebels to this point. They've got themselves in the top 10, certainly in playoff position, and just your thoughts on how their year has played out so far.
Yeah, it's those first 4 weeks doing what I would call the old high school style schedule, playing your non-conference, non-region games in the first 4 weeks of the season might have proved not beneficial, especially the opponents. And I mean, they were the it team, right? They were putting up the video game numbers. It was like the Furmans and Middle Tennessee's had it on freshman mode in NCAA football, and everything was turning up on Miss. But then, get to that Kentucky game, hadn't really been tested, probably read more headlines than they should have, or just kind of felt good and played real bad, and gave up a 4th and 7 60-yard pass to the one Kentucky receiver you shouldn't do that to, and Barian Brown, and rest is history. And that was tough, especially early in the season. They bounced back. Carolina looked really good, looked more like the team we thought they were, especially we saw the improvement on defense. And then nighttime at LSU, Death Valley, it was what it was. They gave up or left 17 points on the table in the first 5, at least the first half of that first quarter. And everybody knows you can't just keep that team hanging around no matter how good, how bad they are. And it came back to get them. And 2 losses before Halloween. And everybody was like, well, it's not a 14 playoff this year. You got those get out of jail free cards. You got those oopsies that you can have in mulligans where Ole Miss decided to hit 2 in the water before, October 31st got here, and 2 losses. I mean, the mood was down. The mood was sour. The fans on the message board for us was just, all right, well, when does Chris Beard tip it off, and when does basketball start? It was not great. That bye week, I always felt their 2 bye weeks were perfect for them. I know playing 7 straight games is not fun for anybody, but getting those 2 bye weeks in the meat of the SEC schedule, I thought was beneficial, even with where they were after LSU. And I think it helped for that game, after that game, and for heading into this game. The first one, they get to shake off, kind of go mope if they wanted to, feel sorry, have that week to kind of go through the motions of practice, but then re-lock in with that Oklahoma game. And we saw from that second half of that Oklahoma game to now, this is probably the best football team maybe you can match with anybody in the country of how they played in these last 10 quarters. I mean, it's been a very impressive 10 quarters. You housed Arkansas in a place that's been a house of horrors for them in Fayetteville. They always prefer to play Little Rock, meet them halfway. They do a little bit better at War Memorial Stadium, but Fayetteville has been awful. You beat them by 30 plus, and I mean, that shocked everybody. And then the Georgia game, they put themselves back in the conversation. Maybe you thought they'd have 1 loss heading into that game, maybe the LSU win or something, not 2. And then they just, did what Lane Kiffin said he was doing a year ago. I mean, revenge games are not really a word you hear a lot anymore, just because of the climate of the sport or any sport. But they circled that one. That was you broke up with me, I'm going to show you a year later kind of thing. I mean, I didn't realize how angry and motivated they were until they said it after the game. And Kiffin sat there and said, this game started a year ago. when I sat with y'all and said we got to get bigger, faster, stronger. We got to look like an NFL team. We got to look. He acknowledged we don't even have to get off the bus look compared to the Alabamas and the Georgias. Same thing everybody says. And here we are. They shocked shocked the world, shocked Oxford, shocked everybody, tore the goalpost down. And I think having that week off was good because this game screamed hangover game, or whoever would have been next screamed hangover game, because the buzz is still here from that game in this town. And you can't sit here and tell me that, the players and the coaches will say the right things. The coaches probably can get past it faster with experience, but these are still just kids who've just done what nobody thought they could do, even though they were better this year. For them to shake that off a week later and go on the road to a place like the Swamp, no matter the kind of season Florida's having, that's tough. And I think
Yeah.
getting this 9 week set them straight, and here we are. That's probably a longer version than you asked for, but here we are.
No, that's a great rundown, and it has been interesting to watch it play out because you're right. A lot of folks maybe thought they were dead in the water after those 2 early season losses, and much like Florida, a bye week came at the right time to kind of right the ship, and now they got themselves in prime position. Before we break down this matchup, Jake, I gotta ask. Early in the fall, before actually Ole Miss took some losses, there was a lot of talk about Lane Kiffin in Gainesville. How much of that trickled into Oxford? Did he ever get asked about it in a press conference? And how much of a talking point was it those few weeks where it was really ramped up?
With just how the Auburn situation went a couple of years ago, I at least, and I can't speak for everybody else in the room, but I was going to at least wait until to see if there was news worth being, like if the trigger was pulled with Napier during the season or what. I was going to wait for that to happen because people can sit here and lie to you to your face in town, but everybody knew this was the next job to kind of worry about or to circle, so to speak, of if it opens, that Gainesville will be the place that Ole Miss might have to worry about again. Keith Carter may have to see what he's still got in his pockets to boost Lane's contract here. But it was no secret that unfortunately, it was the talk of the town amongst kind of us, even in media days. I mean, like, it feels like Florida has, the tough schedule, the closing schedule, and what are they going to do? And then it started poorly, and we all watched, and you were there. You saw how this season started and went. And, we felt like it might happen, and then they got some wins. They beat a Kentucky team that we didn't know. Luckily, Florida should be. We didn't know how bad Kentucky might be after that Ole Miss win. But you take the Texas game out of there. That's just what it was. You didn't have Lagway. Florida has looked like a better team. They got that vote of confidence. Maybe it came at the wrong week before that Texas game, but Napier got that vote of confidence, and it's all died down. And we never asked him. Nobody ever broached the topic. And Kiffin has said the things he said, not nationally, that he's never said before about family and being rooted down here. And so we all kind of got the impression it would have to take a tough offer or a hard sell to get him to leave Oxford. But we knew that Florida was the school if that happened. But for right now, it looks like that we don't have to have that conversation.
What did you think of him tweeting out the Gators? Was that just?
I will say that he did one like at South Carolina because I missed it. I was driving into the stadium or getting dropped off, and so I missed the initial thing. But I saw the blowback of people mad at him tweeting Gators, and at that time of the season, that was kind of where you didn't know what the Napier's hot seat was or what outside of y'all who were there every day. And it's Kiffin, so I just roll my eyes and move on. But for a lot of people, his strategic or lack thereof tweets can ruin a day or a month or a year. And so a lot of people were angry about him not being focused, being locked in. But then they beat South Carolina, and it didn't matter. And he did it again. And I don't know if it was the truth, but somebody gave him, I think, a cop out, which I don't blame him. I'd take it too. They asked him, well, he tweeted one for the South Carolina game, and they won. So maybe it's a superstition thing. And he ran with that in a reply and said, thumbs up. I saw it on my morning jog or something. So who knows? They look like the same Gator from, 2 weeks earlier. I doubt he was jogging in Columbia, the same day as the LSU game or whatever game that was.
Yeah.
But he does that, and or he says, hey, I'm busy. I like this. I'm sure others do what he asked them to do if he's not near his phone or computer. But luckily that's died down. We haven't seen many Gators. I'm hoping we don't see any today or tomorrow.
It
But
would be funny if he did it when he got to Gainesville.
this would be the week that a Gator could pop up again, and then everybody just holds their breath because it's the everybody loves it when you're doing well and you're number 9 in the country and you're winning and you beat a Georgia. But if he does it and they're coming back from Gainesville with a what in the world just happened, it will be a scarlet letter type thing.
One other thing on this note, because it seemed like there was a point in the year where he was critical of the fans and either the crowds or them not staying for the whole game. What was with all that? Because I saw Florida fans, jump onto that on social media and be like, "Hey, coach, you won't have to worry about that in Gainesville." But
Yeah, it's been he's done it last year. He's always does it in September when there's a not so great start to the home schedule, which hey, y'all kind of control that if you would like
sure,
some better non-conference games and stuff. And it just is what it is. Fans come, or you know, there's a close fan base in Oxford and close enough to drive, but there's a larger fan base further away. And when they see now that almost every game's on the app or SEC Network or ABC, and it's not a Georgia game or host of a Florida type game, that they can watch it at home. And I think there's more to it than on that side of there's factors with each individual fan or family of, hey, we can stay home this Saturday, watch it, save our money or whatever, and then go to the bigger games. Now, does a coach like that thought? Probably not. But, he would probably prefer to have the stadium full for 60 minutes, blowing out, Furman 73-6 or whatever it was. But that's just not what it is. And I think he knows that. I think he just, like, he's not going to pass up a chance to get quip in or a thought in, especially this week when I asked him about what does the conference championships matter, and he said what he said, and then Lane Kiffin once again became the talk of the week. So it's just what he's going to do, and I'm sure he'll do it next year. I don't know what our September schedule is yet because they're doing it year to year now instead of announcing stuff year and a half or more in advance. So we'll find out what the non-conference is. Getting Washington State as a replacement for Wake Forest probably helps, at least that one game early in the
yeah.
year. So, but yeah, it's just he's done it before and he'll do it again, especially if they have a good year this year and he feels he can kind of peacock and do it again.
No doubt. All right. Well, before we get into this matchup breakdown, we're going to pay some bills real quick and encourage everybody to go visit rowback.com for the best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rowback, they're completely changed the game with their incredibly comfortable active wear. They just released their new licensed game day collection, and it's fantastic. Novel polo designs, clean hoodie and Q zip designs from some of your favorite schools, including the Florida Gators. Definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Use the code Gators20 on rowback.com for a generous 20% off all new customers through the end of this fall. That's RHOBACK.com. 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code Gators20. Now, as we kind of get into Saturday's matchup, we'll start with some players to watch for Ole Miss. I know there's some that at least that Florida fans are very familiar with. And we'll start on the defensive side of the ball. Jake, who are some guys that Florida fans who either haven't watched Ole Miss or have need to be concerned about maybe giving the Gators fits?
I think it's that entire starting defensive line for starters, kind of full stop. We'll acknowledge the Gator in the room with returning Princely, Umami Ellen coming back, and I'm very proud that I got that last name correct because
You
it's how
did very well.
And but no, he's been great with us to talk to it. But we did not get him this week. They've been a little better with we didn't get Juice Wells before South Carolina, so that's just how they're doing it. But no, that defensive front with him, Jared Ivey, Walsh Nolan, JJ Pegues, that's the most dominant unit of a whole defensive line I think Ole Miss has ever had, especially in this modern era. You've had your Robert Condichis and star guys, or your Patrick Willis at linebacker, but you've never had a total group that can control or change a game. No matter you block these two, but the other four, and I'm leaving out converted linebacker to defensive end, Sunter and Perkins. The sophomore who everybody was kind of like, well, he didn't really put on a lot of weight in the offseason. We saw him in August and got a little worried, but he has become perfect in that position. And Pete Golding and Randall Joyner, defensive line coach, have found him the perfect spot. So those are some to watch, but also that linebacking group. It's with Chris Pupal, transfer from Arkansas. He has played, I think, higher than my expectations were for him. He can take over a game as well. That defensive line's blocked. You've got to watch out for him. And TJ Daugherty, another guy who's on that linebacker group. So it's really that front seven the defense. Trey Amos, Alabama, defensive back that came here this year. He's been good, but that secondary, as we've seen at times, especially at the end of the Kentucky game and even throughout some other games, that's the area that can kind of get picked apart if a quarterback has the time to find his guys or has time to just find his progressions.
And as Jake mentioned, a ton of pressure this year from that defensive front for Ole Miss. They rank number 1 nationally with 46 sacks on the season. Just incredible what that unit's been able to do. On the offensive side, a lot of firepower over there as well. Jake, who are some players to watch on that side of the ball? And I know it's got to start with the quarterback.
Yeah, Jackson Dart is kind of the end-all, be-all. As most elite offenses are, especially in the SEC, you got to have that quarterback. But what I've been more impressed with Dart, but it's by proxy, is not having Trey Harris, who may or may not play Saturday. He may step on the field once as a decoy, which he's done before, and then hop off. He's listed as probable, which is the best status we've gotten from him in a month on those availability reports. But without him and the nation's best receiver numbers-wise, it's caused Dart in that offense to evolve and rely on guys we thought he would rely on. But, Harris was just that safety, especially when games were not going well or were tight. He just was always throwing to Harris trying to find him. But in this last month, Jordan Watkins, who had that game against Arkansas, Caden Lee, who's has flashes, he's taken that next step in his sophomore year that we thought he would take. They have become the reliable. Juice Wells has been up and down. He just hadn't had the consistent year that people thought they were getting out of him. I think that injury was still bugging him some, and maybe he's playing better in this last little stretch and maybe more healthy. And then finally, they remembered Caden Prescorn is on their team and is a tight end and had those 10 catches in the Peach Bowl. And, I think a lot of his disappearing act was I think they needed him and even transferred Daquan Wright to block with the offensive line injuries. And they were having so much pass protection problems at the start of the season that I think they had to use them as extra guys on the outside to block. And so they just weren't there making the catches, but they have shown up a lot more, especially in the Georgia game, that Arkansas game that I keep going back to. So he's got a cast of characters now that we all thought that every defense had to look out for. They just hadn't been used. And then this last stretch without Trey Harris, they had to use them. And Dart is seeing, we are, they may be better. Is it weird to say they might be better totally without Trey Harris on the field? It's making him have to utilize all his weapons. And so I'm hoping he's learning that whenever Trey comes back, whether it's now, postseason, or at the Egg Bowl next week, to use everybody. And that stretches it. This is coaching 101. It's easy to sit here and say it, but I'm hoping he's learning that he's got guys out there and that's not wearing number 9 that can do just as well.
And then do they have any dynamic returners that could make something happen in the return game?
They got Micah Davis late. I'm talking like camp might have already started type late, or at least a week of as a transfer to kind of be that returning guy. He's never shown big splashes. He had some decent returns, non-conference games, lesser opponent type matchups, but he's just been great. They just need a guy to catch a ball and punt. That's all they need. That's been an issue for them historically a lot. They've never just had a guy that they felt great can just catch a ball with somebody staring him in the face or running him down. And he's been great. And kickoffs are what they are now. You don't see a lot of kickoff returns, but punt game, they got what they needed, and just a guy that can hold on to the ball and catch it and give it to the offense.
No doubt. Well, we'll start looking at some matchups here as we get Jake out of here so he can get on the road headed to Gainesville. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out to myperfectfranchise.net as we do each and every week. If you're ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy Andy can help. He's a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at myperfectfranchise.net or calling or texting him at 404-973-9901. And 12 p.m. Saturday in the Swamp, these two teams will kick off. We have a preview coming at Gators Online where kind of Jake gives his thoughts on Ole Miss in this matchup. We'll be returning the favor over at OM Spirit as well for you guys to check that out. But I asked you about it in there, Jake, and you already mentioned it. You know, the one thing that hasn't been elite from Ole Miss defensively is their pass defense. How much of a concern is that for Saturday against a quarterback in DJ Lagway that has shown that he can push the ball down the field?
Yeah, and we saw last week he doesn't have to be fully healthy to still be a threat.
Yeah.
But still he just if he has time to stand there and throw, he doesn't have to use his legs. He can stay in that pocket. That's the one question mark, kind of the area of concern. I mentioned Trey Amos has been good, but Isaiah Hamilton wants to transfer. He's had his moments. He's the one who got turned around on Barry and Brown and gave up that big play on fourth down. LSU picked on Jaden Kennedy, who's been with Ole Miss for a couple of years, transferred from Tulane a few years ago. So there's been times where they found the guy that matches up poorly. I say opposing offenses, and just picked on them all game, or gone to them when they need to get that conversion or make that big play. And so that's where the secondary has had its problems. Now, of course, you can say they played better last month. That's because the defensive line has just playing at an insane rate, and the secondary just has to kind of play prevent defense on third and long, second and long, and it makes their job easier. It would for anybody, but when the defensive line isn't getting the pressure they need, and it's still that tight matchup, that secondary is a concern. And if DJ gets time back there,
yeah, and Florida has only allowed 13 sacks this season. Tied for first in the SEC. How much are you looking forward to that matchup between Florida's O-line and Ole Miss's defensive line, and where do you think the Gators O-line could stack up against some of the better fronts that Ole Miss has faced?
Yeah, just from us from afar, who are focused on our teams every Saturday, and not really, we're just seeing results, score results or highlights. I was shocked to see that that's not a Florida's weak point. That offensive line is doing its job.
Yeah,
whether Mertz or DJ or somebody else, they've done their job. And only giving up 13 sacks at this, that's what, a sack a week if you're playing every week at this point. That's what you ask for. That's tremendous numbers. And so I'm excited to see this kind of basically good on good matchup to see what this defensive line can do against a unit that is not letting people in their backfield very often. And that's been the bread and butter this last month is you're putting guys behind schedule, behind the chains from the jump. And so I think the little test will be good for them. That Georgia offensive line, I thought would give a test, but the Ole Miss defensive front was just on a different level that night. Everybody's seen that clip from above the sky cam where they just ran through that offensive line like it was a walk-through practice drill. So I'm excited to see after a week of rest and everybody get a little healthier how this matches up on Saturday.
And then on the other side of the ball, Florida, they are coming off a really strong performance when it comes to sacks. They got 7 against Garrett Nussmeier, and LSU's passing attack, which had been ranked really high. It's still ranked in the top 10. Not quite as good as Ole Miss. But what do you think about that dynamic? And I asked Lane Kiffin about it on Wednesday because, if you look at Ole Miss's offense, that's one area where they haven't necessarily been great, kind of just middle in the pack of sacks allowed, but they've allowed 20 this year. Is that something that Florida could probably try to attack them at?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's the offensive line is kind of the one soft spot. It's gotten better. They've got some guys healthy and a little bit more depth, but they have been out of whack, out of sorts from the jump. They've had injuries in camp, didn't have everybody back since week 1, and been moving people around, or guys would come back and get hurt, or even just come out during the middle of a game and you lose them for a game. So that's been why the numbers are what they are in terms of Dart getting sacked more than you would have expected him to be getting sacked this season. So yeah, if that defensive line Florida can find soft spots to get through, get pressure, I think it's going to come down to the pass pro again. Maybe the tight ends aren't open as much, or both aren't running routes. They're staying back. Dominic Thomas, who was just a running back that they've tried just mostly because Henry Parrish had that season-ending injury.
Yeah.
Had a couple nice pass pro or blocks in that Arkansas game, and I think they've gone to him a couple times since. But I think you're going to have to get creative if just the normal offensive front five are having trouble, especially early on, and they're not finding that end zone as fast as they need them to.
Going to be interesting to see how it plays out, Jake. As you mentioned, this is your first time ever to the Swamp. What are you looking forward to on the trip, man, besides seeing the stadium?
Well, I've lived in Florida for 13 of my years, 10 in Destin, so I've been close to Gainesville, but even living down there and even Panama City Beach, I never made it to the Swamp. So I've heard stories, I've seen it on TV. As a Tom Petty fan, I'm excited to see what this that experience is when they play that song.
Yeah, no, it's one of the best traditions in college football. Wish it wasn't a nooner, but it's good for guys like you and me. We get to get done writing a little bit early. So, well, listen, man.
Dinner at normal dinner time hours sometimes.
That's right. That's right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and joining us, giving us some perspective on the Rebels. It's been quite the season for them, and the return of Lane Kiffin to the Swamp happens on Saturday. First time since 2009 when he came as Tennessee's coach, and he was the villain back then, Jake, and now he's coming as one of the most popular guys among Florida fans. So it should be a great matchup. Let all the folks know where they can follow you and read your work.
Oh, yeah, on X, Twitter, whatever we're still calling it. It's at Jake Thompson, and the letter O, letter N, and then the number 3, and then omspirit.com is where you can find all our stuff.
Good stuff, man. Well, happy travels. Make sure that you enjoy Gainesville this weekend. Hopefully you get to have some great dining spots that you check out and get a great game on Saturday. We'll see you guys in the Swamp afterward for our rapid reaction. For Jake Thompson, I'm Zach Abaverdi. Take care, everyone.